there was a race candidate.
I know it. Welcome to Twin Cam, and welcome to this angry thing, the Trackhawk.
Took you a minute. It took me a minute because these Dodge names are all so involved.
Trackhawk, Hellcat, Spider, Whippet thing.
Speaking of the Hellcat, which Eric just mentioned, what we're sitting in, this Trackhawk, right in front of that camera, there's an engine. And it's the same engine you find in the Dodge Challenger and Charger Hellcats. It's the 6.2 liter supercharged V8 from those cars. 707 horsepower and 645 pound-feet of torque. That's why Dodge bills the Cherokee Trackhawk as the most powerful and quickest SUV in the world.
I just think it's angry.
It's pretty angry, all right. It gets on with it. It's funny to watch the vehicle from outside and see how when you accelerate hard, it hunkers down, does a slight bit of motorboating, meaning the front lifts up, and then when you lift off the throttle, it kind of gets taller, almost like a top fuel dragster gets taller, or at least it looks that way.
The thing that I think is cool about it is that it's actually kind of sleeper-esque. There is a Trackhawk badge on the rear hatch, and there's a supercharged badge on the driver's side door, and I think on the passenger side as well. Other than those things, and a slightly different grille design, and yes, big yellow Brembo calipers sitting in the wheels, it kind of looks like any other Cherokee. And people are not expecting it to do what it does. And that's kind of a lot of fun, I gotta say.
And what it does is go from 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds, and the quarter mile in 11.6, which is pretty spiffy for any SUV. And that's quicker than the competitors, like the Land Rover, Range Rover Sport SVR, I believe it is, and the Porsche Cayenne, or the Porsche Macan.
Yeah, and it's funny because
consider those competitors.
Yeah. I find it kind of interesting in a way, this thing, because, you know, it's not going to corner like a sports car. It's not going to stop like a sports car. But, man, it's got a lot of power in a straight line, and arguably, because of its ride height, because of the tire side walls, which are refreshingly thick, it's fairly understated. So a lot of folks are just not going to expect this thing to move out like it does. And it kind of does that in a way that is really more suited to the street than the track. Well, it's an SUV for one thing.
And so if you find yourself out on the highway and you see a Cherokee with big, thick, wide rubber, yellow brake calipers,
quad tailpipes.
Yeah, quad tailpipes. You're not even going to see the Trailhawk badge. It's smoked, it's dark. But if you see one of these, this thing here, and you're at a stoplight, just let them go. Don't even race them. All-wheel drive, this thing hooks up and runs. This will beat, well, most sports cars and most everything else. And really on the street, because of its ride height and its compliance, it's going to be faster than a lot of sports cars as well, because it'll just put up with all the crappy roads that are out there.
Yeah, that's a funny thing. It's kind of practical street fast. It's not going to be the fastest thing on the track despite all that power. But on the street, it's really practical street fast. This thing is functionally fast.
Yeah, it's functionally fast. So in the Cherokee Trackhawk, to engage launch control, you push that there button, you lift the revs, and ideally around 2,000 or so, dump the brake.
It's crazy statistics time.
This Cherokee weighs 5,363 pounds. So it weighs, well, about a couple tons, but it's got 2.5 tons of motor, and that 707 horsepower and 645 pound-feet of torque are enough to really get it going. It does that through an 8-speed TorqueFlite transmission, which is coupled to a quadra-track 4-wheel drive system that has various torque splits in various modes. It's really not an off-road vehicle. This Trackhawk is meant to emphasize on-road performance, where Jeep's Trailhawk emphasizes off-road performance.
Now, Dodge says these are the biggest brakes ever on a Jeep product. Moreover, the front brakes on this Trackhawk are bigger than the front brakes on the Dodge Challenger or Charger Hellcat. They are 15.75-inch discs with 6-piston Brembo calipers. Out back, they are 13.78-inch discs with 4-piston Brembo calipers. All of that adds up to stopping this over 5,000-pound vehicle from 60 to 0 in 114 feet with some repeatability. That's pretty impressive. And if you look here, if you can see it, it says P0 on the tire. They are Pirelli tires, 295, 45, 20. Yes, they are titanium 20-inch wheels. And the nice thing about this big sidewall is it gives you a lot of compliance when you're on the street, which makes for not only a better ride in the full comfort setting, but actually helps the car handle a little better over the irregularities that you always experience on the road.
Now for the motor. Behold, in all its glory, the 6.2-liter supercharged Hemi V8. And right there, you're looking at the supercharger. That's a 2.3-liter supercharger that spins at 14,600 RPM and makes 11.6 PSI of boost. The motor is really strengthened. It's got cast iron block, forged steel crank, hardened bearings, forged alloy pistons and rods, and alloy cylinder heads. That's aluminum cylinder heads. That's the Hellcat motor. Look at the way it sits in there, and it's actually canted back a bit, I guess for balance and placement.
And of course up front, it's an independent suspension with hollow stabilizer bar and Bilstein dampers. And the rear suspension, multi-link with coil springs.
Yeah.
So there's your infotainment screen, fairly logical selection of buttons down here. I like the fact that you can turn the parking sensor off, you can turn the lane departure warning off, and they stay off.
That's a good thing.
Buttons are good, and if you want to go into eco, you just hit it.
Yep.
Hit it again, it's off.
And you don't have these stupid defaults whereby when you choose to turn something off, every time you turn the car back on,
they'll stay off.
They'll stay on. They'll come back on. They'll stay off if you do it in this one without having to reset anything.
Exactly. And you get your climate controls. They're very simple.
And then,
you know, media, obviously straightforward. Apps, your different travel link, your drive modes, etc. Wi-Fi hotspot, all of the usual stuff. Drive modes is the one that we find interesting because that allows you to configure the Trackhawk to your specification, and I actually like this configuration for the street. So you've got the steering in sport, you've got the suspension and all-wheel drive in street, and the transmission in street. All of that allows you to drive really quick on the road, but with some compliance and better handling.
Yes, it does, and the modes are going to show up here, but you all can also can access them and shift through them just by going down to this knob simply, although I've found myself wanting to push the various mode sections rather than shift the knob, but it works. And so when you see that, you can go up here and you can see that we're now in sport, and you can see what that does to everything.
Now track, everything stacks up and it's in track. And it's a very aggressive mode for the street. Sure, yeah, you can do it. You're not going to die if you put it in track on the street. That's fine.
Oh my God!
But yeah, it is a very aggressive mode. And we'll go back to auto. And you know, the HVAC and nav and your stupid phone. Who cares? Another thing that I really like about this is that you can turn it off. If you hit the off button, the screen goes off and it will stay off. It's not one of these displays that is bright and always on. And at night, you either want it really dim or you want it off. And I like that. You and I were talking as well about this steering wheel.
Yeah, well, I'll leave it on the steering wheel.
Leave it on the steering wheel.
But
yeah,
it's a little too thick for me.
It's nice here. This is fine. But you get down to the bottom and the midsection and it really is thick. Well, you have this red interior. You have stitching on these seats that's sort of artfully done, and there's Trackhawk marked in the back of the seat. Mm-hmm.
The seats are comfortable enough. They are not fantastic. I think if this was any more red, fortunately it's a little subdued, it would be sort of like a bordello, but again,
it's a little bawdy.
Yeah, you can see that you have this sort of machine look with carbon fiber.
Also, applause to Chrysler and Dodge for going with a conventional shifter.
I like that. Yes.
I like
Are
it.
You listening, JLR?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And your moonroof, sunroof, moonroof, whatever you would like to call it.
The back of the Cherokee Trackhawk is pretty much like every Cherokee. It's actually a little bit tight, but they always have been. It's good down here that they have a rake for the back of the seat so that you can adjust that and get yourself a little bit more space. On a long trip, you might get a little bit uncomfortable back here, but it's not bad. Here's one, the Jeep Uconnect system. I guess you can hook in your own music. You can watch a DVD. You can look at whatever you want, make the kids happy, unhappy. Maybe film yourself crying about the price of... In the center here, you have your vents. Both of these rear seats are heated and cooled just as the fronts are. You also have a 115 volt AC 150 watt connector here so you can plug stuff in to recharge. Again, more ports for recharging, USB ports there. Up here, HDMI 2, I guess that's for the video. And then a V2 plug, so yes, you plug your little portable DVD player in and you can play it through there. So, a few more thoughts about the Cherokee Trackhawk. You know, it's an SUV masquerading as a muscle car, masquerading as sort of a sports car. And it's all of those things, and it's not all of those things. Well, it is an SUV, I guess. It's got some utility. There's not a ton of space back here, but with the seats folded down, the volume is not bad. You can get what you can get in a normal Cherokee. Let's talk about price, because... okay, it's a Jeep, but it's a pretty expensive Jeep. I don't know, it might be one of the most expensive Jeeps ever. Right here, I have a handy-dandy Monroney. That's what they're called in the car business. And believe it or not, all in with all the bells and whistles, you know, all the systems.
On this one, yeah.
On this specific one, the price is total $99,965. And if you don't believe me, well, perhaps that will focus. Right there. That is a lot of Jeep. That's a $100,000 Jeep.
You know, I'm glad that Dodge, that FCA, Fiat Chrysler actually makes this thing. You know, rationally, there's really no reason for it. You know, a 700 horsepower SUV Jeep, but sometimes doing the things that aren't rational is rational. And I just like that we have the freedom of choice, even though this is expensive. It's an expensive choice, but we have the freedom to make it.
That's true. I mean, that's been going on for the last several years, more than one would think, despite an atmosphere which would really, you would think, discourage that kind of thing. So, I applaud it too. I'm glad that it's being done.
That said, you get back to what we were talking about. It's a very effective performance car slash crossover slash SUV for the street.
Yeah.
I mean,
they really should have called it Street Hawk in a way.
They really should call it the Street Hawk. Outrunning this thing with a competent driver in it, I don't care what you're driving, that would be a tall order on the street without going so far over the edge that, you're in somebody's living room.
Right, and that's the danger. You outbrake yourself with this thing. You get into a corner too deep and you just can't stop all this mass, even with those huge front discs that are almost 16 inches in diameter.
We'll say a word about fuel economy. Our current, as I'm looking at it right here, cumulative average MPG is 11.4 miles to the gallon, and that's a mix of driving it fairly conservatively and then also obviously getting on.
Yeah, I mean, we're in traffic right now, but that we haven't really been driving for that long. That's more a result of thumping on it a little bit yesterday. It is a SUV, a bundle of fun.
It's a Jeep terrorist.
Yeah, it's a Jeep terrorist, all right. You see this in your rearview mirror, you see it at a stoplight, just let it go. It's impressive every time you land on it. But I tell you, I must be broken because I'm starting to get used to it.
I'm still impressed, but yeah, I'm getting a little used to it. I'm gonna have to go out and scare myself a little bit more.
Let's get to it. We'll see you next time on Twin Cam.
Okay. The hell was that?